Are you getting the rhythm of it?
Yes, it's a bit, you know, amateur. Okay, just in terms of the synchronous sessions, one of the things we also have been doing in our process is looking at the research on neuroscience, and what we're learning is essentially this whole conception of brain as the central processing unit is breaking down in the scientific community, and the conversation is really around sort of a holistic intelligence. And one of the kind of key discoveries is that there's actually more neurons in the body than there are in what we typically think of as the brain. And typically what we think of as the brain, well, don't know why that happened. Typically what we think of as the brain is essentially the last to know when you take in information. So all your senses are filtered through the body and coming up through the brainstem. They take a little ride that ends up in this frontal region of your brain, and it takes a little bit of time to do that. And so essentially your brain is the last to know when something happens. So one of the things we'll do online is we're going to allow time for, when we ask questions, for people to kind of consider the sensations that are happening, or maybe the emotions or thoughts that they have. And this might feel, in the U.S. culture, this might feel a little bit slow in terms of the downtime that we provide for people to respond. So we just wanted to give you that as a, just to let you know it's not that we can't hear you or something. It's really we're waiting for the opportunity for people to actually think about some of the things that we're talking about together. So I think that's pretty much for logistics. The workshop, like I said, it has 4 sessions, and you can see that laid out on your C2 Gen site. And Liz, today's schedule, I guess, looks like this. We have this synchronous online sessions. There are 3 parts. We're going to start with our shared aspirations. After that, looking at how change happens, change models, and then kind of looking at action research as a method to help us in this workshop process. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started with our first part, unless actually maybe we should stop at this point and see if there's any kind of comments that people have or thoughts or anything they want to say.
So I just wanted to say that this is Liz. So I don't know if Linda and I actually, or I don't even know if Linda said, I know I didn't say that I'm from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and Linda did mention that we had been working on a change initiative here at Cal Poly for 6 years or so. And I think that a lot of the things we're talking about kind of we've learned through that, but we're also continuing to learn and understand how we change and how we grow as people and as educators. And I just wanted to pause and say, does that sort of overview that Linda did, those four sections, did that make sense? Do you have any questions on, can you go back a slide, Linda? Maybe another slide. So the idea that we're going to start talking about change models, and then particularly about mental models. So the ways that our brains or our bodies or wherever we are doing our thinking is organized. And then you can see it's a little bit hard to read this because it kind of goes in a clockwise fashion. Then we're going to talk about particularly navigating change in organizations. And then all along we're going to be using using the things we've discussed about to do our own change experiment. So the last session we're going to be talking about, how did that work out for us in our own change experiment? Does that make sense, that overview? Any questions? Anything, you want to do something else?
I'll just make a comment. Yeah. I'll make a comment. I think it looks good. I mean, I'm interested in just organizational change. And so, I mean, what you're saying about it really is the faculty and their development, makes a lot of sense. So I guess I'm kind of open to, your experiences and what you've learned from them. So in terms of the outline, I didn't have any preconceived notions about it, so it looks good to me. One comment, Linda's audio is very staticky. Liz, your audio sounds good. So I don't know if there's anything that can be done with that, but it's intelligible, but it's a little bit hard to understand, Linda.
I agree. I wonder if you could just talk into the map the way that I am, instead of that fancy microphone you're using. Yeah. So, and bear with us, we feel a little bit, I know I do, feel a little bit like nervous, like we're going to mess up, I'm going to mess up on something or do something wrong, but that's why I'm really glad that the initial list of 50 people didn't actually end up. I'm so happy to, I really am looking forward to getting to know the three of you as we move through this. It's pretty exciting to think we can actually have some lively conversations. So anyway, I just need to confess that I'm sort of feeling a little bit, maybe like students feel when they just try something new, like this synchronous stuff. So it's actually probably a good place to be learning.
Does this help you? Is my speaking now any less staticky?
Maybe we could have Leonard introduce himself.
Hey, Leonard, we can't hear you. We could see you talking, but your audio is not coming through. Hey, Sydney, can you help Leonard get set up?
Yes, I just set a note for having problems with audio. Under the meeting menu is Audio Setup Wizard. That's a good thing to go through. Sometimes you might have two mics that are attached to your computer for maybe you have an external camera or something, and Adobe Connect needs to know which one that you want to use and set particular levels. So and sometimes maybe you don't have a built-in mic and need to attach one. So that would be the first thing to try is meeting Audio Setup Wizard, and we can work around it. But it sounds like Leonard can hear you, so I'll work in private chat with Leonard to get things organized.
That'd be great. Thanks, Sydney. So I guess we'll go ahead and move to the next thing. Is that, no?
Oh, I'm sorry. We have Leonard say something.
Oh, okay, we got him.
Leonard, we saw your microphone came up. Are you able to speak now?
Okay.
Just totally we can speak, we just can't hear you.
So, Rich, do you have any feedback? Does this seem like a good thing to be doing? Do you have any other things we'd like to be covering, or?
So I'm
You need to.
very interested in the topic just because we're trying to implement a lot of change here at our university. So this is a very timely course for me.
Yeah, yes, great. So I think now what we're going to do is kind of, one of the things that we've been practicing is something that we call a sticky wall. And we don't exactly have a sticky wall here today with you, but we're gonna, the way it works is that we all sort of share our ideas about a particular question, and they kind of become visible for us all to see. And so usually we have start with a question, and then we start posting sort of answers to those questions to see our collective. So it's a practice of a little bit sort of seeing our collective and not necessarily just the individual thoughts on things. The other thing is that we then can continue to focus back on the question that we're asking instead of following rabbit trails about other things that we end up talking about. So that we're just going to go through this process that we call a sticky wall. We're going to be using a whiteboard. And the question we have is, you know, really what you, at least today, you're here for an hour and a half, and whether you come back again is a different question, but really just sort of today, why are you participating? What are your aspirations? I think we sort of said some of those things, but what we'd like to do is sort of get all of those aspirations up for all of us to see. And actually, I wonder if we can, no, you're going to do it, right? Linda's going to record what we say onto a whiteboard so we all can see it populated as we progress through the discussion about why have we chosen to participate. So what we're trying to do now is bring up a whiteboard so that Linda can collect our responses to the question. Oh, there's a whiteboard. That's good. Yeah. So we have written up here, what are your aspirations? And for us, it's quite parallel to why you participated. That we imagine that you think that there's some aspiration that we have together or that we have individually about participating in this. So if you could just unmute your mic and go ahead and say what it is that you imagine, what are your aspirations for this, or why you're participating. I think we're just going to try it where people can just talk as they want, and unless it gets too confusing, and then I'll try to control it a little bit. But there's so few of us, I think we can do it that way.
Well, we did a curriculum change in our department this past year, and it's ongoing, and I think we still have a ways to go in terms of changing the way we teach in the new classes. So I guess my aspirations would be learning about some strategies to help facilitate that next level of change. We've accomplished big change and changing courses and so on, but I don't think we as faculty have changed that much. I kind of foresee that we're going to be teaching the new classes in the same ways as the old classes, and I think for them to be effective, we need to do things a little bit differently. So, you know, change is really hard, and I have a sense that there's some fatigue in my department. So, just looking for some strategies to, you know, help keep it going.
This is funny because Linda can mute me, and I don't know that I've been muted. I got to watch her. Anyway, so I'm going to sort of reflect what you said, that you have done some changes, and you're looking to sort of looking at faculty maybe as a sort of continuing that change. Is that sort of correct?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's true. You know, I think for a subset of faculty, some faculty change occurred first. They certainly recognized we needed to do some things differently. We're going to be getting more faculty involved in the new curriculum and the new courses, and the new courses, they really need to be taught in more of a project-based mode instead of a lecture test mode. So I think there's still a transformation we need to make amongst pretty much all of us, but especially some of the new faculty that are going to get involved. And I guess by new, I don't necessarily mean brand new assistant professors, but just faculty that maybe weren't a part of the curriculum redesign. We have about 40 faculty in our department, so.
So is it a little bit about at the level of sort of pedagogy or context setting for, when you say project-based, I imagine that students then will have a sort of a context for learning the things they need to learn.
Right, I think a lot of it is about pedagogy, and I think it spills over to some other things like the type of classroom that we use, the section sizes. We've allowed the section sizes to creep up, and which is unfortunate. So there's some interrelated things, I guess. The staffing of the courses and so on.
Thanks, Michelle. We can add later too as we continue to collect. So this is the time where we're going to leave space. So if there's silence, that's what we're attempting to do, is leave space for comments, which is difficult for me. So Linda sometimes kicks me under the table. But
We've left so much space for Leonard that he's not in his chair. Oh. This is going far. You have your mic unmuted. I guess I do. Oh, Rich, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. So our university is growing, our school anyway, our school within the university is growing very rapidly, both at the graduate and undergraduate level. And it's forcing us to make a lot of changes in the way we've traditionally done things, because we have a much larger student body than we used to. And I guess we're looking for strategies for guiding that change or implementing that change, particularly when other parts of the university aren't growing as quickly as ours and have different problems than us.
so I think my aspirations have to do with expanding the community of educators who are thinking about the same things we're thinking about. So I'm excited that I actually have never met any of you before. That's part of my aspiration. Also, I have an aspiration to create a more loving engineering. So that's sort of, I'm always on a mission to ask questions about how can we be kinder and more nurturing, I guess, but not necessarily losing anything about what makes engineers engineers. well, maybe it's losing some of the things. Anyway, that's my aspirations. I like to ask questions about how could we be different in the things we do. And that requires change too. I'm also, I do always want other people to change. Like I want my department chair to change, and I'd like the dean to change. Maybe she could go to Michigan Tech. But I also really think it does require me to change. And so I'm always wondering about that. Me being the narcissist that I am. No, just that we do need to think about our own change process. I think so, yeah.
Leonard, are you, I could tell you're so filled with thoughts, but still not able to get those thoughts into sound that comes through the internet? Is that the case? Sydney, have you worked anything out with Leonard in terms of the sound?
Well, we're checking some things. I would go with typing for the moment. One of the things that, and this is for everybody here, is that when you log into Adobe Connect, it requires that Flash Player be enabled, and it's a pop-up that could either be blocked by your browser or disabled by your system. And so within Windows, you'll need to check to make sure that Flash Player is enabled. So that's what Leonard is taking a peek at now. So you might just want to go with text while he goes through those steps, or carry on otherwise.
So Leonard, are you willing to type in the chat anything about your aspirations?
While Leonard's doing that, I'll make a comment, Liz. I came across a website last year. It was sort of this data analytics thing, and it looked at the words in Rate My Professor, and so you could do searches on words like caring or fair or unfair, and it would show like how many times per 1,000 words that came up for professors in all different disciplines, and also by gender. So, for example, I tried this for some different words, and I put in, I think I put in things like caring and fair and unfair. So the education department was highest for caring, and engineering and science was lowest for caring. And then for fair, again, engineering and science was very low on that one. So I guess I like one of your sort of overriding goals to make engineering a kinder, more loving place. We've definitely got a long ways to go.
Okay.
Leonard, thank you for your question, and I can see it. And I'll go ahead and add it to the sticky wall.
Go ahead and summarize. Yeah, that's.
So I think what we'll do right now is I'll go ahead and just kind of comment on what it looks like at this point. Normally we're able to organize these thoughts in columns of like ideas. I see we're a little limited on the technology here, but what is in common is that everybody's interested in change. And Leonard didn't say this, but it looks like Michelle, certainly Liz and I, Michelle and Rich are in a milieu where there is institutional change happening. And either it's change initiated by one of you all, or it's change being forced upon you from outside forces. And so this is one of the things that we recognized as in our work, is that change is one of the things you can always count on. That there are forces external to the institution that are causing change, and there are forces internal to the institution, to include the desire for creativity, the desire to improve things, that are really promoting change. So we also, like Leonard, noticed that there are a number of change initiatives that truly, they have a profile that looks like this, where you get, really large amplitude of change, and then that thing just sort of trails off in retrogrades to the previous state. We've been involved in things that are similar to that as well. So we also are interested in why do some types of change cause a change of state and then maybe an elevation to a different state, and why do some types of change actually look like apparent dramatic change, but then actually retrograde back to the original state within a short time frame. So there's those cases, and there's everything in between. Some change actually promotes further change, and this is one of the things that has us continue working in this realm as well. So with that, I think it might be a good idea to begin looking at this notion of change models. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to our original, at least I think I am, going back to our original document here for a sec. So here we go. We're going to, a lot of what we're working with together in this workshop, it has to do with models that we hold. And in particular, we're addressing change models together. And one of the things that is very useful to do is to begin thinking about how does change actually happen. And it's often the case that we have change models, but we often aren't aware that we are holding them. So one of the things that's useful is to begin trying to unpack the models that we are holding, so that we can sort of look at them in front of us and ask ourselves, gosh, is that model actually how the real world works? Or how am I acting in a way that's inconsistent with the model and therefore undermining my change? So the first step that we like to take here is just sort of thinking about models in general and how those affect our chosen actions. So since we're all sort of in the science fields or science-based fields, we can relate to the notion of models. And we can relate to this idea if we actually were designing for gravity and we had a model of gravity that was maybe inconsistent with the way that we know that gravity works, maybe something like this. You can imagine, if we imagine the force of gravity was in this direction versus towards the center of the Earth, the kinds of things that we would design would be very different. And so this is why we actually look at models, is because the mental models that sometimes we tacitly hold are strongly influencing the actions that we take. So in general, the models will condition the way we think and the way we act. So we thought it might be an interesting place to start to kind of look at the change models in the sciences. So as you all look at sort of these images, or this very well-known Newtonian statement, what sorts of things come to mind in terms of the actual change model that is at play? Yeah. By the way, that wasn't a rhetorical question. So I know that oftentimes we speak in rhetoric where we're in a classroom, we're just sort of pretending like we're asking a question, but we don't really want an answer. So this is really, when we look at this stuff, how do we think change happens? What is required for change? And this is really people might have a whole bunch of different models, but this is just sort of to stimulate thinking about how does change actually happen, or how do we imagine it happens? And feel free to, when you have a thought, feel free to unmute yourself and share it.
So Linda, what you're saying is there's sort of, in this example, there's two different change sort of theories of how change happens. One is about a force, right? And then the other is more, is that what you're saying? She just gave me the funniest look. I guess I'm confused on what your question is. So we want to come up with what is the change model in each of these two instances for ourselves.
Or what do people see as the model of change? Or when they, for example, you had Michelle, you guys have a new curriculum. What is the model of change? What's the process of change? Rich, you have a model where you've got these pressures from your institution and you feel you need to make some changes. How does the change happen? What is your model that describes that change process?
Well, I think we're experiencing, we're the object at rest that's experiencing the external force of growth. But that's not, I guess, so that's causing us to need to change, but I don't think that's actually, I don't know, in my mind, I don't see that as driving, I guess, causing the change. It just creates the need for change, which may be a distinction without a difference, but that's how I think of it.
So you might say that there's some stimulus that initiates a change process, this external force or forces. And the change process itself may be driven by something other. Is that right? Am I capturing what you're saying?
So I guess I don't see, I mean, I guess I think of the growth as not so much initiating change as just creating, basically, because there's no reason, there's nothing to say that we will actually accomplish any change. We could grow exponentially and never change. We need to, we should, but it's entirely possible that we won't. So I see the change, the growth, as creating a need for change, but not actually initiating change, driving change, or anything like that. I see it's creating a big ditch that we're going to drive into unless we change.
So if I hear you right, you're saying we're pointing to growth. You're saying that's an external force, the influx of more people, or demands by the administration to take more students in a class, something like this. And so what you said you're not sure that will result in change. Well, really, what is the model of change that you hold? How does change actually happen?
Right. So I guess I would probably be more on the end of the spectrum towards the change coming from internal processes, which would, I guess, be the caterpillar to butterfly model.
So change is, you're driven by some sort of internal impetus, some internal force. Is that correct to say?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Can you add it in? So we're trying to manage the whiteboard in the background here. I'm going to try to pull up the whiteboard. Share whiteboard. Yeah.
So Rich, I have a more question about the internal process change model. So the change comes from an internal process like the butterfly or the caterpillar changing into a butterfly, but is there an initiation that happens, do you imagine? Or like is there something that in an individual, when will they choose to change? If it's from inside, what is the cause of that?
Well,
Catalyst?
in our case, it's the real discomfort caused by trying to squeeze a lot of students into a educational system that isn't designed for them.
What you're saying is there's some sort of internal discomfort that then causes, or an external discomfort that causes an internal need to change? Would that be it? I'm trying to generalize it a little bit.
Right. How would...
It's hard to think of it, isn't it? Like, yeah, how do I think this
How do you
happens?
generalize from a bunch of whiny students who can't fit in their classroom, right? I mean, is that an external because they're not us, or is that internal because they're part of our department and not being accommodated? Now, if we've got...
So is it the discomfort from the students that is causing the faculty's need to change? And the students' discomfort is caused by the structure of growth,
Right.
right? Yeah. But that change has to happen within somebody. Somebody has to sort of take ownership or being discomfort enough or whatever in order to enter into the process of change.
Right, which would be the faculty.
That's great.
Okay, so I don't know if it's like what I started. You can add to it, can't you? So I tried to capture it that way. How about other people? Do other people see how they imagine change happens?
Leonard has.
Oh,
Oh yeah, see, Leonard's got a microphone now. I can say a little bit. I think in our model of change would be, there was a sort of top-down, the department chair saying, let's look at the curriculum. and then from there, I think there were some like-minded faculty who had maybe a similar vision of how we might make some changes. And then, from there it was sort of about persuasion. If we just persuade other faculty that this is a good idea, then they'll, jump on board and see things the same way we do.
Yeah.
So you're saying both top down and persuasion? Is that what you said?
Right. I think, to get the ball rolling, definitely the top-down helped. I think if it were a group of faculty that, wanted to change the curriculum, there just wouldn't have been a lot of momentum, or I don't think we would have stuck to it. So, the chair didn't prescribe what should happen, but just, knowing that he was receptive to something happening, I guess, made a big difference. Pretty much what he did was set up a committee, and then, was kind of hands-off from there. So there wasn't really a deadline, or, so, but it was important that he kind of set the ball rolling.
So a little bit like somebody was a champion, maybe not so like authoritarian or top-down sounds a little bit more negative than what you're saying, that somebody was sort of holding a leadership role to have a vision for what could happen? Yeah, I think that would be accurate. So, yeah, definitely a champion. He's somebody who interacts a lot with alumni and advisory board and so on, and so, it was, I think, something he could talk to those constituencies about, and they would be excited about it, and Okay.
And then there were a number of faculty that were excited about getting involved with looking at the curriculum. So, at least half a dozen were pretty excited about that. I often wonder about, like in our own lives or in our own teaching, say, how is it that we've changed over time? Because I'm sure maybe you're all brand new teachers, but I've been teaching for a long time, and it's changed a lot. And I wonder sometimes I try to think about what caused me to change. What was that happened? I don't always have a good answer, but. Well, I think for me and a number of the faculty in our department, a lot of it was our interactions with students, and positive interactions and negative interactions. And so most of the people who got involved with this process were involved with senior design or other project experiences that students could have. And I guess we liked that mode of interacting with students, and we liked seeing some of their successes. And it was more rewarding than some of the experiences in more traditional classes. Yeah. Go ahead. You say.
And so I'm wanting to check a couple of things, because we're trying to capture, as you all talk, we're trying to capture the models that you have seen or experienced. And so far what we've heard is something about, Leonard put something about, someone pushes change and then convinces others. This might be something similar to being sold something, like someone sells the idea of change, attempts to get buy-in. That's a common phrase. Get people to buy into this notion of change. We've heard you say something about the top-down, which there are probably different versions of that, but just the generalized thing is someone in a position of authority stipulates there will be change. That's something that can happen. And then there's this notion that there are ideas that are inherently attractive, that there's a reward that comes from participating, whether it's a reward of seeing students more engaged or actually having the teaching itself be more life-giving. So there's something about this notion of things being inherently attractive, and then there's models where you have some external force that is pushing on the change. So there's a push model, there's a pull model, being pulled by the inherent attraction, or a pull meaning you're being sold something, and you think, okay, I'm going to buy into that idea, often with the expectation of some return on investment. But it's a notion of sort of having the person step towards change because they're pulled in by some kind of value that it offers them. If we didn't do anything, would things change? I heard some people say something like, well, there's more people, but things won't change. Are things static, or are we static? Do we imagine?
Well, I would say that things do change, even if we don't intentionally do that. Certainly, the students are changing in some ways. Their attention span might be a little bit different. They're used to interacting with devices a lot, and there's a lot more, just sort of tools available for teaching. There's a lot of things online to supplement what we do. So, yeah, even without any intention at all, my typical classes look a bit different than they would have, 15 years ago.
Can you hear me now?
So one of the things about these models is that, of course, they often have consequences. So just like the vector for gravity, if we were thinking gravity went this way, we're convinced that's how it worked, all our design around that's going to have a consequence. And so the same is true for our change models. For example, the cell model, and where you have people get buy-in, one of the things there's a risk in that model, and one of the risks is that when people buy things and they're not happy with the product or the thing they get out of it, there's this discontent. And this can happen in organizations as well. I've certainly conducted a change process where I've essentially sold somebody a bill of goods, and when the bill of goods didn't turn out the way they wanted, they were upset. And so this is one of the things that we are trying to raise consciousness about, is that when we enter into a change process with a particular model, that model comes with a whole set of expectations that we might not be able to see up front. Yeah.
And of course, really also none of the models are real. Just like we know when engineering we make models, and just because they're approximately teach us something. And I think for me, it's been about being able to have access to a bunch of different models and have an idea of, oh, well, this model might be good in this situation, or like if I'm talking to my children or something, I might actually want to use a cell model. But when I'm talking to a colleague, I might want to just use an attractive model. So a little bit that we have more capacity to make choices around that. I also wanted to reference the references that if you go to the lower left corner of this, in this collaboration setup, we have this references PDF, and we just have a couple references in there, but one of them is Borrego and Henderson's from JEE, and they outlined 8 different change strategies. And I think that's it's a kind of a good overall look at change in higher ed or change in engineering education. But they lay them, a lot of them out as models. I don't know if they call them models, they call them strategies. But I thought that was kind of a good, just in our realm of reference to look at these 8 change strategies. And of course, there's many, many, many people who have written about change models and change and things like that. But this is just one of the references. And I think we're planning on adding more references to this, but this is where we're starting right now with this reference PDF.
So I think if people don't have any more thoughts on the models, we're going to move on, just kind of closing this notion of models, and then move on to a practice around how we track change in human systems. So let's see if I can get to our other screen here. Okay, so one of the things that we were showing in this picture was that this represents essentially 2 extremes in change models. This one right here, that change requires an application of force, is essentially the model that underlies most of the thought in STEM fields. It comes from this Newtonian idea that things will stay at the same, in their same state unless an external force acts on them to change the state. So it's this notion that force is required to change. Now, there's another model that often isn't really laid out, which is that change itself is a spontaneous and emergent process. That it's possible that instead of forcing change, one of the things you can do is set up the conditions that are required in order for change to take place, similar to a chemical reaction. So you set up the conditions of temperature, pressure, you have the precursors in close proximity, and having the right conditions can then provide the opportunity for a spontaneous reaction and a permanent change to take place. And we share these models because we're of the belief, having done the work ourselves, that a human system, like a system of even of a classroom or an institution, is more or less like the system on the right, a complex system versus a simple system. So in the notion of the Newtonian model, this works great for simple systems where you're able to essentially control the variables so that you can isolate forces, or you could at least control the forces that are being applied. And in a living human system where you have a social dynamic, you have the history of the people, of each person that comes into the room, and their own sort of psychological states and traits, and then you have the faculty member and the social expectations that are around that person, around the student. You have all that mixing together. That, we believe, is much more represented through a model of a complex system. And when you compare these two systems, you see that a simple system is one where you reduce the variation essentially to cause and effect interactions that you can control. And essentially this works great for steady state or static situations where you're looking at heat transfer through a composite wall and the boundary conditions. And often in these cases of a simple system, the observer is separate from the actual thing that's taking place, the change. And everything is knowable and controllable. or at least to the extent that you care. Now, in a complex social political system like a classroom, the complex nature of it allows you to account for the whole, meaning quite literally the whole of that person, the whole of the social system itself. It allows for the fact that it's dynamic and recursive, so that not only are the expectations, the unseen things, the implied power dynamics, all of those are happening all at once in a classroom, and they're happening recursively. They're happening at your institution. The relationship between your dean and your provost, all that stuff is happening in somebody's mind at any given time, and people's behaviors are influenced by it. So the observer in the system is really inseparable from the dynamics that are taking place. And so in a system like this, in a complex system, I don't know if you can see this picture, but this is actually a school of fish up here. And you know that in a school of fish, they often shift spontaneously. Like the whole system can change state, change direction. And it's not necessarily controlled as far as we know, but it's somehow an interplay of these dynamics that are causing these state changes. So for us, we've noticed in our own research that this particular model of systems is, it more accurately maps the reality of the social system in which we're working versus these simple systems where these force-based models of change are very useful. So we just kind of contrast here that in a simple system, it's great to use force on an object to get something done. Works very well, engineering works very well. And in a social system, though, of institutions, we feel that a model that is much more benevolent is this one in which you're looking at complex systems where the actors in the system are actually recognize the fact that the other people are actually people with their own interests, motivations, and desires for outcome, their own values. So that's sort of, we just kind of contrast those two different models of systems to kind of set up this notion of, since the models are so different, how then would we actually act inside that model in order to induce change? And this is where I think, Liz, you wanted to lay out a way of acting in a complex system.
Yeah. So does anybody have any questions about what Linda was talking about complex and simple systems or comments?
Yeah, I have. This is Leonard.
Linda's timing 16 seconds.
No, you can't hear me. This is still not working.
Oh, we can hear you. We can hear you, Leonard.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I did have I went and got a headset. So I do have a question. You were talking about a force on a simple system, but you change complex systems by forces also. I mean, your school of fish, if you want to change its direction, you apply a shark at one end, and they're all going to change direction. So that is the application of a force. So I guess I'm having trouble with your analogy. I don't know. Is it?
No, that makes sense.
Of talking about it.
Yeah, no, the thing that's different. I'm going to mute you guys so we don't get feedback. So Leonard, you said that you're having trouble sort of eliminating this notion of force because in a school of fish, a shark shows up as a force. And that's certainly true. The difference is that the change is not predictable in the same way that it is in a simple system. Where in a simple system, you know, if you can apply a force in a particular direction, the reaction is known. But in a complex dynamic system, I don't know if you've ever done this, but you've taken a tire of a bicycle, you hold onto the axle, and you spin that thing really hard. And if you actually try to apply a force to the center, it kicks back in kind of unpredictable ways. So in a dynamic complex system, the notion is that the response is often unpredictable from the point of view of being able to say, okay, I know I apply this force A, and these are the exact state changes that take place.
Yeah,
And
I guess I would talk about a chaotic system, because in a chaotic system you cannot know after a few time steps or whatever, you cannot predict the outcome.
yeah, that I think that's another maybe explanation of the chaos. Yeah, that's another way of thinking that. But I also wanted to just say that within any system, if it is complex, there might be simple systems within that. Like if you hit a fish with a hammer, he's going to move a certain way. So there is going to be still some simple reactions occurring within a complex system. And I think the complex system sort of allows for more reactions, but it doesn't eliminate the simple reactions. That makes sense? It's part of the complex system.
And I do think we have to move away from looking at change as a simple system, because we're dealing with people and they're not simple.
Yes, yes. I think the other...
Or even less simple.
Yeah, less simple. I think the other thing is that Linda referred to sort of Newtonian thinking that's been pretty dominant in the Western world. And I also think we've also kind of identified ideas of Darwinism, of survival of the fittest kinds of things, and have also really contributed to the models that we think about in change. And I guess that kind of moves me into this other participatory action research that is, it's sort of classified in many different ways, like a feminist research kind of orientation, where Linda was talking about the complex system where the researcher is part of the research system. And this is actually a pretty well-developed, I think it was in the 50s it started. A lot of it has to do in human systems or in communities or in anthropology, this kind of research. It's also been kind of done quite a bit in educational research, participatory action research. Can you go to the next slide, or can I too? Okay. And what Linda was also referring to is the idea of emergence. This is also an emergent kind of research. So it's just as a simple explanation, you know, when we teach a class, often we say, I wonder if I do this activity, if it's going to, how is it going to be in the classroom? And so what we do is we sort of have a theory, maybe we heard somebody else talk about a particular activity, a particular think, pair, share, whatever it is that what we try in a classroom. And we have a theory, and then we try it, and then we notice if it worked. And if it worked, then we're like, oh, okay, well, what if I try this part? And if it didn't work, then we sort of back off from it. It's a little bit, it's very much like that. Participatory action research is like that, but it's a little bit more structured. So we end up starting with a kind of a theory of how we think it's going to something's going to happen, and then we try it, and we then reflect back on whether that happened. Now, there's also sort of three kind of things that have been identified as part of participatory action research. The first is social, The second is reflective, and the third is recursive. So what's meant by social, gosh, I keep hitting the wrong button here. And I'm just going to read this quote because I think it was a kind of a good quote. It's from this Chemnitz and McTaggart. It's a book on qualitative research. It says, at its best, participatory action research is a social process of collaborative learning realized by a group of people who join together in changing the practice through which they interact in a shared social world. So the idea that we're not just individuals acting in a system, we actually are part of the whole social process. So participatory action research really recognizes that. And often you do it with a collective where you as a researcher are part of the process. The second thing is reflective. So it's a process in which all individuals in a group try to get a handle on the ways in which their knowledge shapes their sense of identity and agency, and to reflect critically on how their current knowledge frames and constrains their actions. It's also participatory in the sense that people can only do action research on themselves, either individually or collectively. It is not research done on others. So it's really recognizing us as part of the system, and that we also need to take time to reflect back on, oh, we tried that. We had a theory that we thought was a theory of change, and we stepped into that, and did that actually result in the ways that we thought it would? So it's a process of being reflective. And then the last one is recursive. So we have initial plans.
Can think back on that one first.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Go back. You want to go back?
I asked Liz to go back to this previous one. In this process, Liz, I'm curious about this notion about shaping the sense of identity and agency. And I guess I'm sort of contrasting this process with how you would normally set up an experiment, where you set something up, you're really essentially observing the thing, and you might be recording observations, letting it run out. But here, this one sort of, you're asking questions about identity and agency.
So everybody in the group, the researcher and those who are participating in the process, have reflective disciplines around talking about how they think things are working and how they might be influencing. Is that what you think? Yeah. I mean,
yeah, it's really different. It's really different than how you normally run an experiment. That would normally ruin the experiment, essentially, if you use this method on your normal experiment.
Yeah, I think one of the things that also makes action research kind of different is that doesn't really claim to be able to generalize results into other areas. You might be able to develop theories that then other people can test in their context. But it doesn't really claim to say, oh, we've found this thing, that when you do this, this happens. It's more like, this is the theory we've developed. Now maybe you can try it in the place that you are. So it doesn't really claim the level of generalizability that is typical in sort of the familiar scientific research.
Yeah, I think the purpose, maybe you said this, but the purpose for action research is really achieving a particular result. And you're essentially dynamically trying to navigate towards a desired outcome, yeah? So I interrupted you, but I was struck by that.
That's a good clarification, thanks. So if we go to the recursive part, this is also the idea that it would kind of ruin a typical experiment. Initial plans quickly become obsolete in the light of learning from experience, which is really, I think, what we often do in the classroom, right? We say, oh, that didn't work. I'm not going to do that again. We're not going to keep doing it just hoping that we can sort of measure something. We just pretty much reflect on, oh, that didn't happen. So this recursive nature is that we start, if we look at this, We start by planning, and then, so planning based on theory. I'm going to try this thing. We act and observe, and I think this observation part is pretty important in that observation means that we start to kind of write down, take field notes, or measure something, measure some sort of test results. Then we reflect, then we replan, act and observe, and reflect. So we continue this whole process. We have a theory, we have a plan, we record data, whether it's observational or quantitative, and then we change again. We reflect, replan, etc. So that is sort of generally the process of action research. And again, we always include ourselves as part of the research process, as a real place of being able to generate information because we're part of the system. It's a model of change. So action research is not, I'm not trying to sell you and say, oh, this is the right way to do it. We're just imagining if change happens from the individual being sort of rigorous and reflective, could this be a method of change? Or might it be one model of change?
And I think in particular,
Sorry.
It's a model. The idea is that our methods match the system, so that we're working in a complex dynamic system. We want a method that actually suits that system. So this particular method of action research acknowledges the complexity. It doesn't try to eliminate it. It essentially just tries to account for it by taking ongoing observations and then acting in response to what's observed. Does that make sense? Is that, yeah. Well, I wonder, is this a moment where people might share any kind of reactions at this point around action research as a method or anything else you might have?
Yeah, I guess as a method, would it be something one person would do, or a group of people, or like everybody, in our case, everybody in the department? I mean, does it need like one person as kind of a organizer, leader? What are some ways that it might be implemented?
Well, I think we've experimented with both doing it as individuals, like within our own classroom, and as a group, maybe a group that maybe experiments individually and then comes back and shares results, or we have an intention together to do something and then we reflect on that. So I think we've tried it both ways, or all ways. Linda, do you want to add to that? Does that seem right?
Yeah, I guess what I'll say is the value of the collective conversation is it often illuminates one's blind spots. Mm-hmm. So what we have discovered is that the participatory nature of the action research enables a different type of change to take place, because it enables people to see things that they would normally be blind to.
I also wonder about, with this approach, do you have to give, I guess, buy into the approach up front? I kind of imagine sitting in let's say, a curriculum revision committee meeting, and it would probably take a little bit of effort to get the group to buy into this as an approach.
I'll say for myself, Michelle, that I've been trying to abandon a lot of my capitalist models of change, particularly because the notion of buy-in, there is almost always an expectation of return. And what I have found is that I would much rather since I failed through those models, I would much rather make it explicit the what it is that I'm interested in, and allow people to consciously choose to participate in that or not. So myself, I try to make explicit the value that I imagine this particular method might have. And for me, the value, I think for Liz too, the value is that the means fits the ends. So we're attempting to it fits the ends and it fits the system. So the system is a complex social dynamic system, political as well. And we see that applying a simple system means actually has a lot of negative human consequences. So this particular method allows for that complexity and allows for honoring people to make conscious choices inside of it. So typically the things we try to do is create the conditions for people to autonomously choose things in a responsible way. And that might even be choosing to not participate. So we try to honor people's choices in our change model. That it seems like that is the one that is the most benevolent, is one that honors people's choice to say yes or no to something.
So I'm just noticing the time, Linda. So I think we have 5 minutes. Were we going to go over like homework? Were we going to do that?
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, I can share my screen and have it.
I wondered, can we just give a couple more minutes for people to maybe, if they have any thoughts or anything, and then maybe with a couple minutes closed, just real quickly, the homework. Does that make sense? Yeah, Liz is bringing up the homework. I mean, we're calling it homework, but, you know, it's suggestions for experiments to try in your own lives, and provocative videos on systems thinking. Does anybody have any thoughts before we get into that about anything today or the future?
Linda,
The election, does anybody want to announce that they're running for presidency? The candidacy?
Linda, I had a question about the action research model. Can you give examples of complex systems that you've changed using this model, and what you were wanting to change going in to it, and what ended up happening, you know, at the completion of the change process, if you're ever completed in a change process?
Yes, we have 6 years of examples.
No.
Leonard, we have about 6 years worth of examples, and we're happy to share as we go along. And the results are often not what you anticipate. Sometimes they're gloriously better than what you planned, and there are other times where they're just hellacious. And we've got all of those examples in the last 6 years. So we were thinking that we'd use them as we went along in the session. Yeah. Oh, say one. Okay.
Open education resources or something?
Sure. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I can't. Go ahead, you. Because I can't. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We should.
So I guess one of the examples that I would say is that we had an intent of exploring the use of open education resources for our engineering courses. And so what we did is we invited some people who also had that same interest to join us in a kind of a learning community. And we asked together, what would this look like? How would we incorporate open education resources into our curriculum. And we all sort of explored it in our own ways, and we met weekly, no, every other week? I can't remember. Every other week maybe, and talked about how that was. And a lot of it was, you know, things like, it's going horribly because the students are rebelling because we're not giving them enough, or it's going great. We had this great success with this one open education resource we did. So we came together and had discussions about that, and I think the results were that those of us in the learning community, and then probably also a lot of other people who we were continuing to have conversations with about OER, that really the adoption and the development of open education resources definitely increased over time with us in that group. It's a small little example.
Let me just give you just a tantalizing, I won't, because of the time, I won't lay it out, but I'll give you one example. You know, we initiated a change process at our institution around transformational change in STEM, freshman level. And it's a big, long story, but I'll say the current result is that I've submitted my first grievance in 25 years, and the institution is hiring an outside lawyer to investigate. And we've been incredibly successful. Over 200 students went through it, and faculty and students report transformational changes, as well as our community members in our region. So we've had over 40 different projects, probably involved students of 59 different majors. So a lot of really glorious outcomes, and then a lot of really horrible ones at the same time. And we can tell you more about that, but you know, things happen that you really don't plan on happening, and they're political in a very real sense.
And since we have 1 minute,
I like Liz is trying to be responsible around the time. I think that's good. Can we have Liz give us a little orientation for the home activities? So that will work.
So I just wanted to, I'm assuming that's okay. So I just wanted to show you on this, this is the C2 Gen site, which I'm sure you got to, or else you wouldn't be with us today. But there's offline, so there's 3 different offline kind of things to look at. One is to develop a research question, what the things maybe you might want to be investigating for yourself. And so it's develop a hypothesis or a research question pertaining to your own life that you'd like to work on. Watch these videos, and then between now and the next time we meet, which is 2 days, we were sort of suggesting, and of course you can say no to any of these. You can come completely unprepared or not come at all. That something like changing one small thing, like an example is brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. And just noticing how changing one thing actually does create some sort of different level of sensitivity that you might come with, or you might not. It might not happen either. But I just wanted to kind of put your attention on that. If you want to participate, that'd be great, but please, if you don't, that's fine too. So how do I stop sharing?
So we thank everyone for coming today. It's nice to see you all. Is there anything anyone needs to say to be complete until we see each other or not again?
On the website, I was searching around a little bit yesterday, and I can search around today, but you said there's information on the website about the class or about this homework?
Yes, so the images are actually live. So if you click you hover over them with your mouse and click in the area that you're interested in. It should take you to the content. So if you hover over the offline activities and click, it will take you directly to that's it right there, the detailed.
So this is change model.
They can't hear you.
First session and.
They can't hear you.
But just to see that slide, I guess I need to be somewhere on the website. Like,
Oh, yeah. c2gen.org.
okay,
Have you been there yet?
I have.
So I think you're signed up for this class, and when you go to it, you will, when you go to that class, you'll come up to this part of the site, and you click on this first session, the second session, the third session, and the fourth session.
Okay. Yep. I think I'm doing. I think I'm making progress. So.
Okay. And then if you hover over the offline, like towards right where it says 45 minutes or 1 hour and 45 minutes, you can click there, and it should bring you to the homework.
Okay. Yep. I think I've got it working. So thank you.
So Sydney has provided a live link in the chat box, and that should take you to the C2Gen site. Anybody have anything? Rich? Leonard? No?
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and maybe we'll see you on Wednesday. So,
Okay.
until then.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Linda, go ahead and stop the recording file. And that would be in the upper right, or you can also do that